there's a this is not a regulatory risk, but there was a big thread at Liron, and he did a thread about this, essentially this thing called Helium. Honestly, I don't want to get deep into the weeds on this one, but basically they were offering like a system for people to get paid to offer Wi-Fi hotspots, right? That was essentially that's the elevator pitch. Liron did the math. And it basically amounts to, it'd take like 200 years, or people on Reddit were doing the math. But it amounts to like, it would take 220 years to recoup the cost of your investment for buying the hardware to do this thing. And I actually had someone reach out to me a week before that thread or something, like 5 days before that thread, and say, hey, what do you think about Helium? Like, do you think Helium is, you must think Helium is pretty interesting. And I was like, no, of course. Like, I was like, this is somebody trying to solve the last mile problem, but not even considering the last mile. And all I had to do was think about the people who were going to be most heavily invested in this dumb idea. And it's going to be people in a city who, one, don't really need hotspots already. They have internet. But two, if you were to do this all over a city, you would have people competing all over the same places to be offering hotspots in the exact same place. That is unnecessary, repetitive, and bad. Meanwhile, people in rural areas would not be able to get very good internet, and so they would need to have wired or cabled or, fiber, whatever. Like they need something to connect to an internet. And generally, people who live in a rural area want a tech service. They want somebody to be able to come out and fix it when it goes down. And I don't even know if Helium offers that. I doubt it. But anyway, I guess what I'm saying here is that there's been a lot of promises and conjecture, a lot of nothing bad can possibly happen. And I think we're realizing now that it can and it does. And not all of these things are winners. And if you're going to list all this stuff, if you're going to just go for it, there's probably going to be some level of consequence, I suspect, eventually. Who knows how big or terrifying those consequences are? I think I asked the question originally, I'm thinking that ultimately the worst thing that could happen to Coinbase would be a fine. And it sounds like it could be much worse, but I still think it would ultimately probably be like a slap on the wrist and please don't do this again,
Yes,
So again, we're not trying to stir fucking fear. We're not trying to stir fear, but there are real risks, and they're descending on cryptocurrency.
Well, and
right
I
now.
thought the most interesting thing about Liron's thread was not the thread itself. I mean, yeah, Helium has basically no revenue. It was all overinflated on tokens and stuff during a hype phase without any real substantial there. But I thought the much more interesting thing was the reaction to the thread, right? Where you had like the writer of the piece and an A16Z partner coming out and being like, oh, this is so mean. This criticism isn't fair. This is so hard for us. It doesn't even talk about all the great build-out that Helium has accomplished, despite the fact that no one seems to want it. And it doesn't talk about how innovative this is, and so it's just totally not fair to these experimenters who just want to innovate, man.
Yeah, there we go again with experimenting in art. But whatever.
Also, wait.
I think
just
that one, at least...
Packy was the one responding, right? And he was the one who went on the podcast and gave the really bad houses on the blockchain use case. And then later posted a different clip of him on a different podcast, right? And wasn't his use case at that point Helium? I think his second Web3 use case after he bombed the first time was Helium. I'd have to look it up to be sure, but...
Right. Yes, and then he did he did a 7,000
the writer
word
wrote,
novella response to... No, Packy wrote that.
No. The writer was upset that...
Packy wrote a 7,000 word novella response to that thing. And someone noticed that it was clearly angsty towards Liron. But they were like, yeah, he deserves this hate. And Packy was like living in it and enjoying it and saying like, yeah, I'm glad you noticed this because this guy's just a bad actor. And it's like, no, man, you just wrote a 7,000 word response about a broken thing. And you're not even acknowledging your own participation. there were more people being... I honestly wish there was more people being held responsible in some way. I don't even mean in a regulatory sense. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want everybody to go to fucking jail. That's not my point. But, like, I don't know. Time Magazine should not be allowed to even write anything critical about Web3. Like,
after shilling Axie, you mean?
You guys shilled it the whole way up. From Axie Infinity, which they shilled and talked about how great it was for Filipinos, and now they're like, oh my God, it's a Ponzi scheme? And you're like, are you guys just
who could have ever figured this out?
And to their own NFTs that they were shilling at the top. I'm sure that those Time Magazine NFTs are doing just great. I'm sure the floor hasn't fallen out from those things, right? Just give me a fucking break, dude. You're not allowed. Stop. Oh, but you can't say who's allowed to say what. What kind of what is it? Reliable narrator, I guess, is the word I would want to use. Like, they're not reliable narrators, you know? They clearly had an MO. They clearly went for it, and it's the same as that New York Times article about
latecomers.
The latecomers guide to crypto. Just a bunch of fucking nonsense, and then the same people who go out and write these like highly praising a bunch of garbage, then later write and go like, oh, I can't believe it was a scam. And you're like, maybe you can't believe it was a scam because you did zero fucking research at the beginning. You know, maybe that's why. I don't know. That's crazy, I guess. Crazy that journalists for respectable media operations should do their own research. That's what I mean. It's just like someone should hold them responsible. They're the ones who should be held responsible as well. They're the ones who help. People forget, but like Ponzi schemes work best when the media plays right into them and says, oh my God.
How does he do it?
Making money. That's how the first Ponzi scheme made a bunch of money.
How does he do it? It's incredible. Look at how much these people are benefiting. Everyone's getting rich and you aren't.
But unfortunately, there's no regulatory risk for
Unless
these,
there is.
You know, for these companies. And these, there should be, but none of them are going to get sued for
and I don't
writing articles
I don't
that
really
are
think
positive,
they should,
you know.
but I think like...
Me either.
I think that we've talked about before, a lot of these institutions are gradually eroding the trust that they have left and are doing a poor job of maintaining and continuing to build that trust.
Yeah, I want to thank them for doing such a piss poor job, because without them doing such a piss poor job, we wouldn't be able to talk about this and people wouldn't seek us out to be like, hey, what the hell is actually going on? Or for that matter, Molly White, who's been doing an excellent job of archiving all these Web3 scams, and Zach XBT, who's basically a full-time journalist exposing scam after scam after scam. Like, he's doing the journalist's job. So I don't know. In some sense, I'm like, well, there you go. Guess we know who's actually doing the hard work now.